Does anyone prefer slides or seeing faces talk? Feel free to pop it in the chat. I can go either way. I can use the slides as a visual reference, or I can use Miss Sparkle over here as well. You like both? Okay, cool. Well, we'll start off with the slides and then we'll come back to faces as well. So I'll share my screen. Hi, I'm Erin Pennings, by the way. This is what I've been doing today, is hanging out with her. So I've missed a big chunk of the program today. So today we are talking about building an authentic brand, because a lot of the time you hear people talking about building a brand, you hear all of these things, but you may or may not feel like a brand is right for you, or you may feel like, yeah, I'm listening to what everyone else does, and by the time I've listened to what everyone else is telling me to do, it no longer feels authentic. It no longer feels like the business I want to build, or it no longer feels like the public persona that I want to put out into the world. So today, I really want to focus on teaching people how to build an authentic brand. So who am I? That's me leaning up against a tree, but I'm a brand marketing and messaging strategist, and I help entrepreneurial leaders figure out what that brand voice is so that we can then amplify the incredible work that they're doing to reach larger stages. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about my framework, because it's designed to make it feel authentic. It's designed to blend what your audience needs and what they want to hear from you with what feels right to you, so that not only is it authentic to you, but it resonates with the people that you want to connect with. So I've done a ton of different things. I'm not going to read them to you, but it feels eclectic, and it reads a lot more like two truths and a lie than pretty much anyone else's like background that I've ever talked to. But the commonality between all of these, from doing helicopter flight sim tours and sales to being a copywriter and marketing strategist, is figuring out the right message. It's all about figuring out what resonates with everyone across the board. So when I set out to kind of codify what I do to make it feel authentic to me, because I work with fun people and I want the fun to come out, because if whoever I'm working with doesn't resonate with my fun factor and the fact that I make myself laugh, I make up words in the middle of sentences sometimes, then it's not going to feel like a good fit for anyone. It's not going to feel authentic. So the reach visibility trajectory is fun, but it's also like very tactically oriented. It blends all of these things to help you build authority and visibility across the way, while you're also feeling like it's like spot on with yourself. And even though it's an arrow that kind of goes straight up and to the right, it's really kind of more circuitous, because you may feel like, you know, I want to dial this one piece of my brand back in. And we'll get into like how I define a brand here in just a minute. But to kind of get a feel for what this process looks like, it's a blend of research, brand strategy, copywriting, funnel building, and then just constantly reiterating until you can figure out the right message for your audience. Okay, so it's iterative. So with that in mind, today we're really focusing on the brand values, the brand strategy, the brand voice, in a way that we're making it authentic. I always like to show you kind of where this fits into your marketing strategy, because it really is very early on at the beginning. And no matter how long you've been in business, yeah, this is what we're covering, what we're not covering. No matter how long that you have been in business, if you have not taken time to develop a brand, whether you are just starting out, you've been doing this for 20 years, there is no time like the present to get it kind of onto paper, because for so many of us, what this is and what we are and what we aren't lives in our heads. And so as such, it's living, breathing. And if we never put concrete words to it, if we never refine or at least get a draft down onto paper, it's hard to make it consistent, because it ends up being this moving target in our heads. But if we take the time to kind of codify it and get it so it's set, what we can do from there is use it as a lens for everything that we do and say, oh, is what I'm doing fitting in with this brand? And then from there, you can either say, yes, it is. I want to keep doing this. No, it's not. And if it's not, does your brand need to have a little shift? Or do you need to revisit what you're doing so that it, again, feels authentic to what your goals are in the world? Okay. Feel free to pop questions into chat as we go. I will do my best to stay on top of it, but otherwise we'll have time for questions here kind of at the end of things. So all that a brand really is a story. And the reason, people talk about brand all the time and it's become a little bit of a buzzword. A lot of people think that your brand is your logo or the colors you choose or, a variety of other components. Really, it's all of it. It's the way that you show up in the world. And again, whether you run a business, whether you are in this to grow as a person or as a business or as both, your brand is how you show up in the world. And it really is the narrative that people tell about you. So if someone were to introduce me as a helicopter base manager, I would probably tell them, you've got me 20 years ago, because that was what I did 20 years ago, but that's not the narrative for who I am now. So one of the best ways to start thinking about your brand is paying attention to how people introduce you, whether via email, whether they're introducing you when you're coming in to speak in a group, or whether they're just introducing you to a friend. Because if what they say about you isn't really what you want to be known for, then you've got to do some work setting that narrative. So all in all, it's a story about you, about your business that you portray into the world. It's what you become known for. And so there's a lot that's really tangible about this. Like, yes, it is the colors, it's the logo, it's the words, but there's a lot that's also intangible about this. It's how you make people feel. So you want to make sure to put some time into this up front. You don't have to stop what you're doing right now by any means. This is something that's evolutionary, it's evolving. But it is absolutely 100% worth your time to sit down and get your thoughts down, because from there you can adjust, right? It's like setting any goal. If you don't establish a baseline of where you are right now, you can't reach whatever that goal is. You can't figure out what the next steps are in your action plan. So, sorry, background noise here. Every business has a brand. Every person has a brand. And in today's world of social media, you better believe that people pay attention to what the brand is. And one way to look at it is, we know companies like Apple, we know companies like Microsoft, we know companies like Google, but we also know people like Haley, who we know as this incredibly authentic person, who really shows up. And you know her more as Haley than as the founder of WEN, most likely. You know her because she's awesome and she makes you feel really good about things. So think about that too, whether you have a business that has 100 people on the team or whether it's you, the way that you show up is the way that people will continue to remember you. So what do you want that to look like? This is coming together to become the baseline of your authentic brand, right? Okay. So I just said it's all about you and your story. And now I'm coming in to tell you something completely different, because it isn't all about you. It is also about the people that you serve. And it's about what they need to believe to continue to work with you, to continue to build trust. So when you look back at the reach trajectory, the first stage was R. It was research. Let me give her my phone. Because of course we're rolling with everything today, right? Apologies for the pause. Here we are. The first step in the reach visibility trajectory is the R, and it's research, and it's about knowing your people. It's knowing who you serve, and it's about knowing what they care about. It's about knowing what their pain points are before they come in. You don't have to speak to all of that. It's not about telling them what they want to hear, but it's about figuring out where they are and where you can come in to serve them to really make an impact for them. So your brand is ultimately the bridge between what your clients want, who they are, and who you are, to figure out the cohesive story. So if, as you're developing this, you hold them at the center and think of how you come in to continue to help them solve their problems, you will win. Another way to think of this is if you, how familiar is everyone with StoryBrand? Feel free to pop into chat. If not, raise your hand, whatever that. If you know StoryBrand, feel free to say, yes, I know StoryBrand. If you don't, I'm going to do a terrible job of butchering Donald Miller's framework. Basically, every story that you read, whether it's a book, whether it's a movie, every kind of story that you interact with has some commonalities. There is a beginning, there is a middle, there is an end. And the beginning is usually the main character walking along, living their life, and they encounter a problem. Then the guide, whoever this guide is, steps in to help them overcome the problem. And the end is them riding off into the sunset. Your brand is much, much the same. The beginning, though, of your brand is your audience, and you are this wise guide that helps them come in. So if you can keep your client as the central, as the hero of your story, and you are kind of the supporting character that really helps them get the result, that will help you grow your brand. Yeah, totally, Susan. It's helped me write so much better. It has transformed, StoryBrand has transformed the way I do brand building, the way I write website copy. It even transforms the way I write blogs and case studies for people, because it's all about knowing who the audience is and their problem. And from there, all the pieces of the puzzle fall into place. But what about you? How do you build an authentic brand? You can listen to 15 or 20 different branding experts, and you will get 15 or 20 different opinions on the right way to do this. And again, by the time you put all of their advice into play, what you end up with is a Frankenstein brand that feels nothing like you, or you don't love 100% of it. And while they'll all have some commonalities in what they tell you, yes, and I guess I'm number 16 and number 20 coming in and maybe giving you a different approach. This is a way that you can do it that it feels right to you. And this is a way that you can take the pieces. Can you turn the volume down, honey? This is a way that, sorry. This is a way that you can take all the pieces that resonate with you and throw out the stuff that doesn't, because you don't want it to be a stressful thing. You want it to feel good, and you want it to be foundational for your business. So I call it the 5 W's and an H style. If you're familiar with journalism, it's the who, what, when, where, why, how. And I'm going to give you, I believe there's 9 things to think about, and you ask some questions about it. And it almost becomes a journaling exercise that you can start, brain dump, bring forward what you love, and translate it into this new document. So of those 9 components, the first one is completely optional. How does that sound? Here's what you can do. Here's the directions. Do this first step or don't. It's up to you. And that is for me to define your brand essence. What is the biggest takeaway that you want people to have when they're interacting with your brand? One of Apple's is innovation. If you're looking at Tesla, it's disruption for some of these components that they're taking through. So yours might be warm. It might be supportive. It might be engaging. There's no wrong way to do this. But this, if you think about what you want to come off of in the world, is like 1, maybe 3 words maximum. That is how you can say, aha. Once you can decide on this, the rest of the pieces become much more easy. Is that English? That's not English. But once you can figure out what this brand essence is, then you can run all of the other pieces for your brand. It sort of ties everything together. Sometimes it makes sense to do this first. Sometimes it makes sense to do it last and then kind of look back at everything through this lens. But then, you know how I said the audience is the foundation? They should be the center point. So they're really one of the first steps. And we've already talked about why they're important, but now I want you to take, and not now as in while we're on this call, but kind of when you go offline, I want you to take time to ask the 5 W's and an H of your audience. Who are they? What do they do? Where do they hang out? When do they need you? What's going on in their life at the point that they need you? What's going on in their life at the point just before they need you? What are some of these problems that are keeping them up at night? Why are they problematic? And how have they tried to solve them before they come to you? This is all super important. And even though not all of this will come forward into your brand as you're developing it, it will become foundational research for the rest of your marketing and messaging. Because if you can define this, you'll already have some of the questions to answer that you know what you need to speak to. Next up, I always guide people through your core values. I happen to love James Clear's core values. I think he has 52. And there are any number of ways that you can refine these. I usually suggest that people choose 3, but no more than 5. You can do as few as 1, of course, but these are your non-negotiables. For me, it's relationships. Relationships come first, whether it's my relationship with my family, whether it's my relationship with my clients. That is more important to me than anything else. And I can tell you what more are, but what I would encourage you to do is you're going through a list of core values. Brene Brown has another great list, is circle all the ones that you love. Look at the list, circle all the ones that you love. Then take them forward and try to categorize them into 3 to 5 categories. And then every time choose the right word for the category. Pretty straightforward. There are about 42 different exercises that you can use to figure out what your core values are. Not the least of which is looking at a list and just saying that one. Why is this important? First of all, when you can define your non-negotiables and why, it becomes much easier to maintain your boundaries. You can set them in stone by writing them down, and then you always have that to come back to. But you have to talk about, again, the 5 W's and the H. What are they? Why do they matter? When do they come into play? Who, what? Who do they relate to? And how do they relate to each of those people? Why are these important to you? This becomes your brand differentiation. This becomes part of the way that you set yourself apart. And again, holding true to the authenticity that is innately part of how you do business. Now, the next step is to set the narrative. What do you want to be known for? How do you want people to introduce you? If you were to hop on a stage in 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, how would you want people to introduce you? What would they want to say you've accomplished? Equally importantly, what do you not want to be known for? What drives you absolutely bonkers about the industry that you're in? What do you want to make sure that you're not doing, right? Because that's just as important to me. When I do this exercise, I did one with a managed services provider in Canada, and they're like, there's a bunch of snake oil salesmen in this industry. We are not that. We back it up with our expertise and our knowledge and always doing the right thing. I think that's pretty cool. I can introduce them as that moving forward, and they continue to be known for that with their clients. What's your secret sauce? And the really cool thing about secret sauce is that there is literally no secret to your secret sauce, as in terms of the process that you follow in whatever you do. Anyone can look up how to do what 90% of us do online, watch videos on YouTube, and figure out the tactics. What makes up your secret sauce is what's in here. It's what's in your head. So it's your perspective on life. It's your collective experience that has brought you to this point. So talk about your tactics all that you want. You are giving nothing away for free that people can't already find somewhere else. Unless you have the nuclear codes, please don't give those away. Everything else is pretty much fair game. But I want you to color this with, what about your background has brought you to this point? What is the path that you follow? You saw that laundry list of crazy things that went from art course developer as an intern in college to assistant base manager of a helicopter base, tour director. I've planned group travel. I've done it all within this. But again, that common thread is marketing. It's how to get people to open their emails. It's how to figure out what message resonates. So that's my secret sauce. What's yours? And again, this doesn't have to be concise when you're doing this. I'm going to give you some tips for how to do this in a way that's effective. And I'm going to rush through this because I've been talking and I'm running short on time here, as I tend to. The next step is to define your products or services. because you can go back to your audience research. What are the problems that you solve for people, or what are the problems that people have? How do you solve them with what products or services, and what can they do as a result? You can see how this is starting to form the foundation of all of your marketing, because by the time you finish creating this brand strategy document, everything else will be a matter of plug and play, because you've already done the hard work. Plug, play, and expand, rather. Now I want you to define your beliefs. Why does this happen here and not or earlier in the process? It's because now you've figured out who you don't want to be. You've figured out your core values. You've figured out your products and services. So what strong opinions will back all of that up? And to me, these are usually should statements. You should or shouldn't. You shouldn't have to create a brand that's not authentic to you. You can have an incredible brand that feels right to you. You don't have to be the expertise expert in the room to move the needle for someone else. These are all some of my beliefs. So you can see how they come into play. A lot of this is common sense. It's like unpopular opinion. You don't have to be the best. That's actually a pretty popular opinion, but it's a strong, bold idea. Lastly, how do you want to make people feel? How do you want to be perceived? This ties a little bit back into the narrative, but we're going to talk about how do you want to come across? Do you want to come across as warm and engaging? Do you want to come across as clinical and professional? Do you want to come across as, goofy and a little snarky? What does that look like? Figure this out, because this is going to be the hallmark for how you speak about yourself and how you put your marketing and your brand out into the world. How do you want to be perceived, and how do you want to make people feel? Of these, you can pick and choose what you include. Again, 5 W's and an H style. You don't have to include all of this, but it is incredibly helpful to think through all of this and to do all of this as an exercise. So, before I show you my checklist, what I want you to do, if this is something that you want to pursue, is I want you to shut down all of your apps, take this list of items, and either create a blank document or open up a journal and start jotting things down. Jot down, what are my core values? And then why does this matter? The who, what, when, where, why, how of each one. And that gives you a journaling exercise. From there, whether you're writing by hand or you're writing in a Google document, you can highlight what you like in yellow, bold it, circle it, however it works for you. Take that and move it forward to a new document. And from there, you can refine and edit. It is so much easier to edit than it is to come up with something from scratch. So that's why a journaling type of activity is so effective here. And it gets into those authentic parts of your brain. The other thing that I'd recommend doing is showing it to someone else and getting them to ask you questions. Usually this should be someone that you are friendly with, but not super close to. People who are your best friends are more likely to be like, yeah, I can see that, and just kind of gloss over it. But if it's someone who doesn't know as much about you, they're more likely to ask some of the probing questions that make you think even harder. So, because I don't want you to have to take all of the notes from all of the speaking I've done, I should have told you this up front. I have a brand voice checklist. I was telling Haley right before we started that I had rewritten the entire funnel, but I had either forgotten to save it or something rolled back. So it's a tech thing. So if you've already downloaded this, I will make sure to resend to everyone who is currently getting all of the pieces for it so that you can take a look and make sure that you're getting the right checklist, because somehow a different checklist was also associated with this. Otherwise, if you have not downloaded it yet, it is a pretty simple, straightforward checklist of all of the things we talked about with some additional food for thought. When you download it, you'll also get a couple of emails over the next couple of weeks, just walking you through some of the next steps that I would take if I was going through this myself again. And if you have questions at all as you're doing this, definitely let me know. I'm more than happy to give you like a quick answer. Yes, I think this is right. And if you need a little bit more in-depth help or want hand-holding, we can talk about what that would look like too. So, that's me in the office that was across the hall the other way. Here are some of the ways you can reach me: via email, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I am probably most active on LinkedIn at this point. But I will, I'm pretty easy to reach if you have questions on what your brand voice should look like or how to create an authentic brand. So if you have questions, here, I'll turn off my share. I'm more than happy to run through any of it.
Awesome.
Questions. I feel like that was too easy. It's too easy when people don't have questions. It's like I either nailed it or it was too overwhelming. It's one of those two.
I feel like it was really clear. Very
awesome.
So y'all can unmute yourselves if you like.
Sure. I can oh, thank you for unpinning me.
Erin, I thought it was very clear as well, but I also loved talking about your secret sauce. So many times we think our secret sauce has to be something that nobody else has thought of, but this day and time, there's nothing that nobody else has thought of, right? With all the connectedness. So I love that affirmation in that.
I think that's a really good point. And then if you have ever, if someone else is doing something similar, that means that there's a proven market. It does not mean copy and paste and do exactly what they're doing, but how can you add your spin to it? Because if you see something, you have an opinion on it. What is your opinion? It goes back to the strong opinions, I think.
Right. Yeah. I liked it. And I liked the reminder of go back. I call them newspaper questions. I guess that's just what I was taught in high school or college. The who, what, when, where, how, and why.
I love those.
Yes.
I feel like if any one piece does not, it doesn't matter what it is that you're writing, if it doesn't speak to those, I feel like something's missing.
Right. Right. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Awesome. Spirit fingers. Thanks, Tim.
Everybody wave your hands in the air. Yeah, so amazing.
Well, thank you.
Let's give Erin a huge round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amazing. Seriously. One of the things I find with marketing and doing a lot of marketing myself is that a lot of people don't have answers to these questions. They don't take the time to figure out their voice. They don't figure out their values, their messaging. And this is the stuff that I think that makes us really uncomfortable in the beginning, is figuring this stuff out. And, sometimes it can be really tempting to try to copy somebody else and try to be more like somebody who looks like they're being super successful. And the only thing I can say is the only person you can be is yourself. Everybody else is already taken. And when you try to emulate somebody else and try to be somebody else in your success, it ends up falling flat and it ends up not working. And, following the simple 3-step system, but if it doesn't fit who you are and what your business is, it will never work.
I think that's also really interesting too, because you could say the same words but if the intent is different behind it, whether it's an email, whether it's spoken, people sense it. And so it's like, if you let go of that outcome, if you have an approach that you're like, I am pushing so hard for this, people can sense that too. And again, you send the same email and have let go of whatever expectations you're pushing out there. It's a totally different response. Could be, like I said, could be identical, but it's this intuition that I don't think enough people talk about.
Yeah. Well, people can smell desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you get to that point where you're trying to force it, there is always a bit of desperation, and it tends to drive people away, even with the exact same words. Even if you follow my simple 3-step process exactly to the letter down to the spacing, it won't resonate exactly the same way. So you have to be yourself and truly yourself.
The other
And-
kid is home from school asking about Minecraft. Sorry.
Of course, that's being a
'Cause
mom.
We're
right?
rolling with it today. We're rolling with it. This is my life that you have a very good glimpse into.
Absolutely.
But
And you're
also to your point about asking the hard questions, it's difficult, and it's much easier to sit down and gloss over it and say, yeah, I'll get to that later. But I think it's a disservice to yourself. It's a disservice to future you, whether it's 5 years or 5 days down the road, to not take the time to do it.
Well, and the other thing too is that a lot of times we mistake doing this work for designing a pretty logo or building a pretty website. You can do this work and never put together a website. I hate to say that as a digital marketer, but it's true. And you could have just a simple, Facebook or LinkedIn page or Google My Business until you're ready to do the other stuff. As long as you know who you are and you can put together a minimally viable product, minimally viable service, and a way to invoice and a brochure with a PDF with what you're offering on it, you can easily get to where you probably wouldn't believe possible. But it's based in this foundational stuff. Knowing who you are and what your message is.